Hi guys, in today's video, I am going to highlight a major problem in the Battlefield community that simply needs to be talked about. If you have been paying attention to the Battlefield subreddits at all for the past 4 or 5 days, you would know that it is an absolute war zone right now, particularly having to do with the next Battlefield game's movement and movement debates in general. These posts consist of things you really should expect: people bitching about movement, people making fun of the people that complain about movement, posts getting made, counter posts getting made, and it's generally speaking the worst I have ever seen the Battlefield subreddit. But it highlights a discussion that we need to have about Battlefield games, and in this video, I am simply going to try to provide the bare bones facts for people. So if you enjoy the content, if you want to follow the next Battlefield game, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and swing by the streams. All links are in the description. I stream every single day. Without going into massive detail, the whole TLDR is Battlefield players are complaining up a storm about the next Battlefield game's movement. And in the comment sections of these posts, it exposes a complete and utter disconnect and a misunderstanding about the very gameplay of Battlefield that a lot of these players claim to understand very well. And this is a very widespread issue that goes outside of these Battlefield subreddits. I've experienced this myself. For whatever reason, a section of the Battlefield player base, whenever they watch any sort of fast gameplay, any sort of gameplay that utilizes the real movement mechanics in the game, a lot of them complain about that gameplay, comparing it to Call of Duty, complaining about the movement mechanics, whether it be jumping, sliding, jiggle peeking, and really anything else. Then a lot of these players will try to make the argument that Battlefield has never had fast-paced movement like this, Battlefield doesn't need a slide, Battlefield doesn't need the ability to jump shot, Battlefield doesn't need any of these advanced movement mechanics, and they just have a completely different idea of what Battlefield is. But their idea of what Battlefield is rooted in delusion. And this is where I'm just going to start showing you guys how wrong these players really are. This is a wonderful video called Movement Guide for Battlefield 2 that was posted 8 years ago by Hakai. I'll link it in the description. In this video, he is demonstrating advanced movement techniques for Battlefield 2. A game which a lot of Battlefield players will make you understand as this super slow-paced, very tactical, very strategic game where you could never do anything like this, but they're wrong. And this is widely regarded to be one of the greatest Battlefield games of all time. But why does nobody talk about this? This was widely used by many competent players. And I'm hinting at something that I'll get to later in the video. But we'll touch on Battlefield 3 now. Battlefield 3, another fan favorite Battlefield game, also had essential advanced movement options. Sprinting was actually really quick. You could crouch in gunfights. Jump peeking corners in order to actually gain an advantage was an absolutely essential part of Battlefield 3 gameplay, and you could even combine jump peeking with something called the ADS stabilization jump that removed the bobble of landing on the ground with your weapon. It's worth noting that in Battlefield 3, you could also vault over objects while aiming down sights, and there was slight air strafing to the movement as well. So that's two fan-favorite Battlefield games that both feature essential advanced movement options that make the gameplay what it was. Taking a look at Battlefield 4's movement system, we're going to ignore the abusable bugs, but those were also used for movement. I'm just not going to discuss it, and a lot of people take massive issue with that. The base game Battlefield 4 movement system had a lot to offer. You could crouch spam even faster than Battlefield 3. There was even more effective air strafing that was controllable with your mouse as well as your WASD movement keys. The ADS stabilization jump returned in Battlefield 4 because it was essentially a legacy mechanic that was carried over throughout games, and this lasted all the way until Battlefield 5, which we'll touch on later. So just to keep count, we are at a total of 3 fan-favorite, critically acclaimed Battlefield games that all feature advanced movement systems that offer things in the movement to form a skill gap. Jumping to Battlefield 1, this game takes a completely different turn, and this is probably going to be one of the longest sections in the video. Battlefield 1 is widely considered to be the last decent Battlefield game ever released, all the way back in 2016. Yeah, I know. Yeah, isn't that depressing? Moving on. On release, Battlefield 1 was the very first Battlefield game to ever include a slide in the gameplay. The way the slide was on release was very controversial because it was omnidirectional. Once you started the slide, you could control the direction you were moving in for a very short period of time until the slide ended. It's very important to understand that Battlefield 1 was designed as a game with this sort of slide in mind. There was a deliberate choice to not include any other aggressive movement options in Battlefield 1. You could not jump peek, you could not crouch spam, and the strafing was painfully slow for a lot of players. So later in the game, after players complained about the slide for over a year, they nerfed the slide and it became all but worthless. The omnidirectional control was taken away, and it was reduced to a purely defensive movement option where you could only slide around cover, making this the very first Battlefield game in history without any aggressive movement options, reducing the gameplay to be purely positional. One incredibly important nuance that everyone needs to understand that happened during Battlefield 1 is a lot of the existing Battlefield player base that has been playing for quite a long time quit during Battlefield 1. Simultaneously, a lot of new players started Battlefield 1 as their very first Battlefield game. So what naturally happened is a lot of players that understood what Battlefield was stopped playing, and a lot of new players only had the understanding of Battlefield 1 as what Battlefield is. And let's keep in mind, Battlefield 1 is objectively the most casual Battlefield game ever created. But jumping ahead to BF5, BF5 saw a bit of a resurgence of what was typical to see in Battlefield gameplay. Jump peeking made a very needed return. The slide made a return as well, and funnily enough, it was very similar but different in many ways to the original Battlefield 1 omnidirectional slide. Battlefield 5 was also the very first Battlefield game where you could jump and shoot at the very same time, and you could also crouch run prone on your back and roll to avoid fall damage on top of leaning, which was usable normally, just stationary holding a corner, and even in mid-air during gunfights. You could jump lean in Battlefield 5 while shooting. All of this came together to form a movement system that the Battlefield player base seemingly has become more fond of as time passes, with a lot of people on these Reddit posts basically just saying, give us BF5 movement and we'll be happy. But as I demonstrated previously, not everybody holds that opinion, which is completely fine, but I do think that a lot of people complaining about Battlefield movement have their complaints rooted in something we'll get into at the end of the video. And finally, I do want to touch on Battlefield 2042's movement system, which has received a ton of hate. The first thing I want to address is a lot of people complain about Battlefield 2042, quote, looking like COD. And actually, Battlefield players say every Battlefield game looks like COD whenever they watch a fast-paced gameplay. One of the key complaints with Battlefield 2042's movement system is that it is, quote, too fast. Well, let's take a look at the numbers here. So if you take a look at this graphic posted in r/Battlefield, we can see the sprint speed measured in meters per second. Battlefield 2042's base sprint speed without tactical sprinting is 6.5 meters per second, which is exactly the same as Battlefield 3 and 4. If you tactical sprint in Battlefield 2042, it is 7.25 meters per second, which is only 0.1 meters per second faster than Battlefield 3 and 4 using the squad sprint perk, which almost everybody used anyway. Some other features of Battlefield 2042's movement are the slide. The slide in Battlefield 2042 is actually more akin to the slide in Battlefield 1, but the slide in Battlefield 2042 is mainly used to gain momentum in order to jump. But Battlefield 2042's slide can also be used in extreme CQC scenarios in order to peek corners quickly or slide to a defensive position. It's very important to point out that Battlefield 1 slide cannot be used to aggressively peek corners, and Battlefield 2042's can. I mentioned previously that Battlefield 2042's slide can be used to gain momentum. This is very true. You cannot slide uphill, but if you slide downhill or on a flat surface, you can use the slide to then chain 2, maybe 3 jumps in a row. If you are using this downhill or you are playing McKay, you can potentially cover a great distance just by quote-unquote slide hopping, which involves landing, sliding, chaining 2 jumps, and then landing, sliding again in order to continue your momentum. Battlefield 2042 also features fairly decent strafe speed considering the other Battlefield games, and you can crouch spam in this Battlefield as well. So those are all the facts laid out on the table. That is what you can do in basically every relevant Battlefield game ever created. And this brings us to the conclusion of this video, where I have to maybe disappoint some of you, because the conclusion I came to is unavoidable and very simple. Some people on these Reddit posts simply have a difference of opinion, and they provide an explanation as to why they do not want a slide in the next Battlefield, or they provide an explanation why they dislike certain aspects of Battlefield movement. Those people are normal people. Those people have brains in their skulls. But the same cannot be said for a lot of individuals on these posts that complain about movement every chance they get without providing a single crumb of decent argumentative explanation as to why they're doing it. And unfortunately, the conclusion that I came to will not surprise anyone that has watched this channel for a very long time, but I also firmly believe that it's the right conclusion. And this is where I have to bring in player skill level to the conversation. It is completely and utterly unavoidable at this point. I tried so hard not to, but it's one of the only things left that explains everything fully. A lot of these people on these Reddit posts and Twitter replies and Discord conversations and YouTube comments that consistently complain about the movement are not good players. In fact, they're probably really bad. And they are really mad and annoyed that other players use this movement in the game to kill them. So their solution is to go on Reddit and complain about it. That's as simple as it is. This is a clear-cut example of a skill issue. As I demonstrated in this video, via gameplay footage, Battlefield has always had movement. So if you don't like that, maybe Battlefield is not the game for you, and you should go play Arma or Squad. And it's kind of funny because every time I talk about this, people tell me to go play COD, but it looks like Battlefield has always been closer to COD than you might want to admit. So that about wraps it up for this video, ladies and gentlemen. If you found the video informative, drop it a like, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be covering every single thing Battlefield 6 related, so if you want to follow that game, this is going to be the channel for you. And I also stream every single day at twitch.tv/enders and this YouTube channel because I multi-stream. Thank you guys for your time. I really do appreciate it. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.